Hey all, it's Mrs. O'Donnell here. Today we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. Our goal for today is to introduce solving quadratic functions by using the quadratic formula. You have this agenda posted in Google Classroom. Make sure you're coming to see me for questions and help during office hours. Once these recordings are made, I will update the agenda with the video link. And you do also have you only have 2 forms this week and your Delta Math assignment. Make sure you are logging in and completing those. If you have questions, please email me or come to my office hours. I have office hours from 7:30 to 8:30 every morning. You can come have breakfast with me and my kids. And I also have office hours from 1 to 2, Monday through Thursday. All right, so we've learned quite a few methods for solving quadratics. And whenever we're solving quadratics, right, we're looking for those zeros. We're looking for those x-intercepts. We're looking for what value could I plug into x that would give me back an output of 0. We've talked about graphing it. We've talked about factoring. We've talked about factoring out a GCF. We learned a solving by using square roots method. We've done all kinds of different methods. Well, so today now we're going to start talking about another new method. Okay, and if you try any of these methods, you might find that you're running into a couple of problems, right? Especially factoring and graphing work really well when you have nice integer roots, but when you start running into rational roots, decimal roots, that's when it starts getting tricky, or irrational roots starts getting real tricky. All right, so let's take a look at it. So the quadratic formula. So this is sort of your catch-all formula that has been created. You can use the completing the square method to derive this formula. I'm not going to take you through that proof right now, but if you're interested, you could go ahead and Google that or look it up on YouTube. So the quadratic formula is a way that has used a method or a formula that has been derived from your standard form of your quadratic function that works every time to solve for your x values. All right, so here's a story that I use to help remember or memorize the quadratic formula, because this is really just one of those things you have to memorize. There's no like developing of the concept here other than looking at the proof of completing the square, which is complicated. Okay, so there once was a negative boy who was unsure about going to a radical party. The boy was a square, so he lost out on 4 awesome chicks. And the whole thing was over by 2 a.m. All right, and this is our quadratic formula that tells us what our roots or what x equals, right? So there once was a negative boy who was unsure about going to a radical party. The boy was a square, so he lost out on 4 awesome chicks. Let's see, it really should just be the C. And let's see here, let's fix that one. So it's just the B. And the whole thing was over by 2 a.m. All right, so that's your quadratic formula, and that's sort of your little gimmicky story that I'm giving to you guys to help you memorize that formula. So now let's talk about how you apply this formula to solve to find your x values, your roots, your x-intercepts. So first of all, you have to have your quadratic equation written in standard form, which we know has descending exponents set equal to 0. Okay, and if it's written in standard form, you have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, right? And even writing it right above will really help you to identify what are your A, B, and C values, because you have to know those in order to plug into your quadratic formula. Excuse me 1 second while I talk to my child. Okay, sorry, I'm back. Okay, so once you have your quadratic in standard form, you can identify your A value, your B value, and your C value. All right, so in this case, A is 2, B is 8, and C is actually -10. Okay? Okay, so once we've identified our A, B, and C value, now you can go ahead and grab your formula and start plugging in, right? So let's see here. If I have x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead. Everywhere I see an A, I'm going to plug in the number 2 in pink. So I'm going to take out this A right here and take out this A right here. I'm going to go ahead and change over to this pink color. Oops. Okay, grab my pencil. And I'm going to plug in the number 2 times 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Everywhere I see a B, I'm going to plug in the number 8. I'm going to go ahead and grab that purple color. I'm going to take out my B right here, plug in the number 8. Okay, sometimes it's helpful to use parentheses whenever you're plugging in so that you can be really careful about what is happening with any negative signs that you might have. And then it looks like the last value we have right there is -10 for that C value. So I'm going to take out that C. Go ahead and grab my pencil here and plug in a -10. I'm going to use parentheses there as well, just to make sure, again, that I'm being extra cautious with that negative sign. Okay. I'm also going to add a negative here, so I'm going to keep that negative with my 4. Okay. And now I've got everything plugged in. I can go ahead and start evaluating. I apologize for the tornado that you guys hear, my child tornado that's happening downstairs. Anyways, okay, that's life, right? C'est la vie. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and just keep on plugging through this quadratic formula. So we've got a -8 plus or minus. I'm going to follow order of operations underneath this radical here. So 8 squared is 64. Plus -4 times 2 times -10. Let's see here. -4 times 2 is -8 times -10 gives me a positive 80. And that whole thing is over. I'm going to go ahead and multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. Let's see. So I've got -8 plus or minus the square root. I can add 64 plus 80 to get 144 all over 4. Now, at this point, I can take the square root of 144, so -8 plus or minus 12 over 4. And this is actually 2 separate problems, right? So let's see here. I'm kind of running out of room here. I've got x is equal to -8 plus 12 divided by 4. And x is equal to -8 minus 12 divided by 4. So let's see here. -8 plus 12, that's going to give me 4 divided by 4. So x equals 1. And -8 minus 12, well, that gives me -20 divided by 4, which is -5. So my 2 solutions here would be x equals -1 and x equals -5. Okay, so here's another example. If you're looking at this, so we're running into a problem. It's a little more difficult to identify your A, B, and C values because your quadratic formula is not in standard form. So that's the first thing we have to do. We have to make sure it's in standard form set equal to 0. So in order to make it equal to 0, I have to get rid of this -1. The opposite of -1 is plus 1. If I do it to one side of my equal sign, I have to do it to both. So I have x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. Now I can find my a, b, and c. A is 1, b is negative 4, c is 1. Right? Remember, this 1 out in front of your x squared is that leading coefficient that 1 often hides from us. Okay, it's still there. We just don't always have to write it. Okay, and then from there you can go ahead and plug and chug into your formula and then evaluate using PEMDAS. Let's take a look at one more. Again, this quadratic is not in standard form, so the very first thing we need to do is get it into standard form. I'm going to subtract 7x from both sides of my equal sign. That gives me x squared minus 7x equals 0. And then I'm actually going to also fill in a plus 0 here because I'm missing that c value, right? So again, now I have an a value of 1, a b value of negative 7, and a c value of 0, and I can plug and chug through my quadratic formula. All right, one more. This one looks a little more complicated, but it's really not. Again, you're just going to make one side of your equal sign equal to 0. In this case, I'm going to add on my left side of my equal sign. I'm going to add 8x, and I'm going to add 1, just because addition's a little nicer, positives are a little easier to work with, right? If I do whatever I do to my one side of my equal sign, I have to also do to the other side. So I'm going to add 8x, and I'm going to add 1. So that's going to give me 0 is equal to 3x squared plus 8x plus 3, and I end up with an a value of 3, a b value of 8, and a c value of 3 to plug and chug through my quadratic formula, right? There once was a negative boy who was unsure about going to a radical party. The boy was a square, so he lost out on 4 awesome chicks, and the whole thing was over by 2 a.m. Okay, once you've got it all plugged in, you're just following order of operations. You're just following order of operations to get you past the finish line. Okay, so just to wrap up this video here, our challenge, and this is going to be on your form for the day, is what is the quadratic formula? So now we have our quadratic formula, and just like I gave you guys a cute story to remember that quadratic formula, I want you now to come up with your own formula. So brainstorm some words that start with A, B, and C, and then write your own story to help you memorize this quadratic formula. Thanks so much, guys. That's all I've got for you today. Make sure you complete your Google form to get your credit, and